Hi, Critical Thinking Classroom. How are you? Did you put your thinking caps on today when you got to the classroom? No, Dr. Feravich, because we're in high school and we don't wear thinking caps, and there is no such thing as thinking caps. Hello, what class are we in? Let's get started, shall we? No, not yet. What's going on? I have to put on my socks. My feet are cold. You know, that Michigan weather is. Hold on. That Michigan weather is all about when do you turn your heat on and make the commitment to turn it off forever until, the next season. Do you make that commitment to leave your heat off? Yeah, we do. We do. We make the commitment. I mean, it's June. Are we really going to turn our heat on in June? I don't think so. No. So what do? Bring out my little heater over here. I literally have my little heater right there. But even then, you kind of have to commit. Stop it. The heater? You really need a heater in June? Really? My house is cold right now. My feet are like ice cubes. But no, I've made a commitment. I do not need a heater right now. For the people who are joining, we're talking about putting socks on in Michigan in June. Okay, so yeah, and I'm getting stuck again. I'm just so absolutely disgusted with this service that I cannot get a decent signal. But my guess is that all of the investigators have told them that they've left, and now we've got the parasites back in the neighborhood. What? What did you just say? Mysteries. Thanks for joining me. We will sometime soon get to our next topic. This is Carol Merrill. Instincts and attitudes. It's not Carol Merrill. Who's Carol Merrill? Look it up. Okay. We were talking about, so let's at least address the topic. I'll at least address the topic for a second. Instincts and attitudes. So much of what we're talking about is about, well, let's start from the beginning. We're talking about the self and developing the self, right? And a lot of what we're talking about as far as the development of who we are has to do with DNA and has to do with what we've learned, right? So always this kind of, when we critically are thinking about what's really going on here, I don't know what is really going on with that hair, but I don't really know what's going on with. That is the mystery, is the hair. No. Should have left it alone. So how much of who we are is our DNA, is our biology, right? As we develop ourselves. And we have learned a lot about developing across time in our, I should have deleted those too. I deleted some stuff. I see I clearly didn't delete a lot of what I should have deleted. We learned a lot about our development. And this is a social developmental theory, right? A social developmental theory. And so we are understanding social development, but because, and I want you to hear this, but because it is a developmental theory, that means that this is written in our DNA. What Erickson is proposing is that we have a natural instinct to seek out trusting relationships at a very early age. We have a natural instinct to, I don't know why I do that. We have a natural instinct to seek out autonomy. We have a natural instinct not to sit here passively like a plant, but to actually take initiative and set goals. This is our instinct, but it's the instinct that helps us survive. It's the instinct that we could say is responsible for our survival, right? But it is also has a highly learned aspect. Why? Because it's dependent on our relationships. Okay? So we instinctually seek out relationships in order to find trust, right? So often we can very clearly see our instinct to grow. It's our biology. How do I know? Because I see you grow. You're not the same height yesterday. You're not the same height this year as you were last year. If you're still growing. So I can see development. I can see that's instinctual. You didn't have to learn how to grow. You didn't have to learn how to get taller. Did you have to learn to walk? That's part of a developmental process, right? That occurs right around what? A year. For all of us. Might be 9 months for some. Might be a year and a half for my son. It was a year and a half before he walked. But right around that age, it happens. It's a developmental process, right? We say we learn to walk, but it really is initiative of the child. It is the desire for autonomy, right? To feel secure with our mom and then go seek out and be curious. That's part of our autonomy. So we certainly have, even in, and this is another thing that's really great about this theory, is that even in our biology, we have incorporated social development as well. In our biology, we have it accounts for social development. And that's good, because how do we get the things that really make life worth living, right? How do we get to those things that really make life worth living if we are not actually seeking it, even with our instincts, even with our biology, right? Did somebody say be a goal setter? Maybe somewhere along the line. But you know what? We set goals when we saw that bottle on the blanket, right? When we were an infant and we saw the bottle on the blanket and we couldn't get to it yet. We couldn't even crawl. What do? We grabbed the blanket and we pulled the blanket towards us and we grabbed the bottle. Problem solving, goal setting, right? We're setting our goals. Okay, all right. 4,000 frames dropped. Thanks, Xfinity. I don't know what's going on. Actually, you know what? I better check out my bill too. Xfinity, I'm just letting you know. It changed accounts. Yeah. Okay. All right, let's keep going. So yeah. That's my way of telling you, Xfinity. Just making sure that you're watching my classroom shows, letting you know. Change the account. Okay. Give me a second here, because there actually is something else that I want to do here. I actually am kind of keeping in the surveys in there, just in case you're interested in the surveys. And then even as I'm scrolling through these PowerPoints, you can still kind of see the surveys. I also kept the information in there about the physical consequences of of our emotions, and in particular, like for example, of our hostility. I wanted to keep those in there too as well. Let me all right, let me move on. I was gonna do something, but let's move on with our defense mechanisms. So I think we talked about, yeah, we talked about all of these, right? So the basically the undoing is basically wishing that something happened differently, and then in your mind you keep replaying that, right? So even like something like a car accident, for example. So a motorcycle driver hit me yesterday, and by the roundabout. So there was somebody coming. He expected me to keep going because it was a roundabout that was not busy. And the thing about it is, it's like motorcycle drivers are like, watch for motorcycle drivers. Well, gosh, there was a motorcycle driver coming. I mean, it was just like a cluster, you know what? Because why? Because there's a motorcycle hit me, and a motorcycle guy behind him. So could have been a real mess. And luckily, that guy just, and the thing about it is when you're doing something like that, like you were doing, motorcycle driver, looking for something that you had no business looking for, paying attention to something you had no business paying attention to. You should have been minding your own business. And if you're minding your own business, you really, that was, from my guesstimation, that was on purpose. What you did was on purpose. I know what you did was on purpose. And you could have really hurt some people. There were enough people around you, 2 other motorcycles around you, that really could have caused, some real injury and harm, all for your own selfish purposes. I know. We go into, the whole thing about this is going into this fight or flight kind of mentality, right? And when we begin to go on an automatic pilot, which is our instincts, right? Those are our instincts. We begin to go on automatic pilot. What are you driven by, motorcycle driver? What were you driven by? What are you driven by over there? Sitting over there taking that picture. What are you driven by? What are you guys driven by? And so that's kind of what we're talking about here in a real roundabout way. I just lost my light. I want to turn this. I want to figure out. There we go. I got it again. I also want to get some coffee too. I know we're in the classroom, in the middle of the classroom, but there's a lot of things going on besides just the classroom, which is kind of what I was talking about in the early bird classroom. Do you walk into your classroom with all kinds of things going on and then wish it had gone differently, right? Why do I think, why do I keep talking about this motorcycle guy? Because I think that he wished it had gone differently. It was a mild accident, and I honestly think that guy wishes that it would have gone differently. Guy looks like the guy over there who's taking pictures of plants that I have been suspicious about for a while. Who are you going to blame those plants on after 4 o'clock on Monday? See, the fun thing about this, when you don't get that many people, is you get to go and throw those things, and they're like, who's that for? Who's she talking to? Who's she talking about? You know who I'm talking about, Blue Eyes. So the undoing is, again, nullifying an undesirable action. It doesn't mean that you forget about it. It means that you balanced it out, is what you did. You balanced it out, right? So I had this thing happen to me, or I was responsible for the argument. I'm balancing it out by buying roses and candy. All right? I'm balancing out the undesirable action, eating too much, by nullifying it, by balancing it out, by purging. It says with an acceptable behavior, but I really do think, is purging acceptable after eating too much? Probably not, but it is a better alternative. Okay, let's move on, shall we? projection. And sometimes these things, remember, they are very similar. There's overlap. Why? Because they're all defense mechanisms. They come out based on instinct. And instinct, too, is a funny word as well. Instinct is a word. I'm going to step over here for a minute, but I'm still talking. Instinct is a word that does have a connotation of a learned aspect. I can have an instinct for these defense mechanisms, but why did I pick one over the other, right? We use these defense mechanisms instinctually. We use these defense mechanisms instinctually. So why do I pick one over the other? I use those adaptive mental mechanisms, right? Some positive defense mechanisms. I use those instinctually. Why would I use good ones over bad ones? Why would I use bad ones over good ones? Because there's a part of it that is learned. When I speak of instinct, so even when I speak of biology and DNA, it changes. So there are always aspects that are learned. But I guess what I'm saying is it hardwired, is what I'm saying. Is what is learned, can you guys hear the humming of that? That's because I had to turn that heater on. It's cold here in Michigan. How ingrained is what is learned? How much of that begins to get into your DNA, right? And it does. Watch my spiritual classroom, watch my philosophical classroom. We talk about that more as well. It does get in your DNA. So don't forget that even when we're talking about DNA or biology, right? I can look at it today, it looks different tomorrow. I started out this tall, whatever, this tall. I'm now this tall. It changes. Our DNA changes. So don't let anybody tell you that you are going to have to be on this, for example, medication for the rest of your life. You might change. You will change, but you might change in a direction that doesn't require you to have the pharmaceutical medication. It's no different than a long time ago, the only monthly bill that we had, basically, we have a gas bill, right, and phone bill, we have monthly bills, but now, oh my gosh, I have hit, gold if I can get you to sign on every single month to something. Got to take that pharmaceutical every single month. Got to pick it up. No way to get out of it, right? So, what's the point of that? We change. Our biology changes. Our chemistry changes. Our neurology changes. It changes every day because we learn something. If our brain stayed the same, think about that. We thought the brain didn't grow or change after a while. Well, the ridiculousness of that statement, if I just learned something, right? Where did I learn it? In my toe? Guess the brain has to change. Guess the brain. And by the way, well, yeah, it changes, but it didn't physically change anymore past a certain. How would you know? Split it open. Do you see my memory? You see it? Can you see that memory that I had yesterday of that motorcycle accident? What's up with that? You can't, what do you mean you can't see it? It's there in the brain, right? So somebody says it doesn't change because I can't see it change. Doesn't mean it doesn't change. I just added a memory to it. Not only did I add a memory to it, I really deepened that memory quite a bit, right? I really did, by making a whole lot of other associations. And that's what's happening. That is what is happening when we engage in these defense mechanisms. We go from one association to the next. Now also, I want you to remember, why are we here? Why are we talking about these defense mechanisms right now? The biggest thing right now for you and me, the purpose of this is for you to identify it. Remember what we said, even for the optimism and pessimism, right? For the optimism and pessimism, we put those in boxes. Good event, stable, unstable, global, specific, internal, external, bad event, same thing. Why? So I can do attribution retraining and basically change my pessimistic statements to optimistic statements. But I can't do that if I don't dissect my self-talk. Here, I cannot engage in adaptive mental mechanisms, we can call them adaptive mental mechanisms, unless I can identify my problem areas. Why are we spending this time on these defense mechanisms? Because if we identify my specific, we have defense mechanisms. We all have it. What's yours? What are yours? That's how we could target not only the appropriate behaviors instead of the maladaptive defense mechanisms. We can target the appropriate behaviors, but also then begin to establish these a pattern of new behaviors so that we could reap the benefits of changing those maladaptive defense mechanisms into adaptive mental mechanisms, right? We still use them instinctually. They come automatically, but we've done some tweaking in our knowledge in order for our automatic responses to be adaptive, to be more adaptive. Good grief, it is cold in here. It's like there's ice around my feet. I'm so cold. I even pulled that heater back, and I have to, just so that you didn't hear the humming so much, and I have to pull it closer. So projection, remember what we said. Every time we use the ego, you're going to think of it as pride. However, it is pride. It is pride. It is what we feed ourselves. It's a self. It's the self. So ego, scientifically, psychologically speaking, is the self, but is it pride? Yes, because we're always feeding the ego. We're always feeding ourselves. Ego attributes disturbing, unacceptable impulses onto another. So it's a little bit different than reaction formation. I have to sneeze, hold on. Okay. So, I'm going to keep that up there actually like this. So we said it's kind of like reaction formation, right? An unacceptable impulse is expressed by the opposite acceptable impulse. I use Andrew Jackson and our former emperor as an example, which was that fear, they overcompensated. They compensated for all the fear that they felt from childhood experiences by being an over-the-top aggressive warrior, right? So this is actually behaving in a way where projection is not a behavior that I engage in for myself. It is, so it's the impulse. I'm not engaging in the impulse in myself. I'm blaming somebody else for engaging in that impulse. I hide the impulse, right? And I put that impulse on you. So instead of I hate myself, what do? I put it on you. Projection, the hate I feel for myself, I put onto you. It's not the best example, but it's a good example. Here's an example. Politician is radically campaigns against gay rights. We've seen this happened in the 80s and 90s in particular all the time. You knew who was gay because he was campaigning on anti-gay rights. right? That's how you knew the politician was gay. He had the loudest mouth about being anti-gay. It just was the way it was in the 80s and 90s. I'm just saying. So, that was a clear case of projection. Clear case of projection. Look up the tap, tap, tap of the foot in the bathrooms of the... See, you think we'll forget, but we don't forget, and I'm here to remind people. So the tap, tap, tap of the foot of the politician who was in the bathroom stall of a rest area. I was going to say truck stop. I was like, don't say truck stop. It wasn't a truck stop, so don't say it was a truck stop. It wasn't. It was a rest area. So apparently you could get some action in the toilet of a rest area if you knew how to tap out a Morse code. Look it up if you want to know. Isn't that interesting? Of course, that was all before, phones and texting and websites and swipe left and swipe right and all that kind of stuff too. What they have to do, they had to go to a rest stop and tap, tap, tap underneath a Morse code underneath the bathroom stall. Example number 2, we are more likely to attribute hostility to others when we are hostile, right? So for example, if your therapist, for example, says, that's aggressive, maybe it's because your therapist has a lot of experience with aggressive behaviors, right? Okay. And is projecting that then onto her patients. We see a lot of therapists who actually can do that, right? They're trying to solve their own problems, and so what they do is they project their problems onto other people, right? Now, I do that too, though, right? If I not as a therapist necessarily, but I was having a conversation with somebody just the other day, and we were talking about marriage. And I was relating everything about what we were talking about to my marriage. Now, that may not have been helpful for that person because I was using my own experience, right? We're using our own experiences in order to what? That's what we talk about. That's where my advice comes from. It comes from my own experiences, but maybe I'm not. Maybe that's a form of projection, right? Maybe my issues aren't your issues, and it's just a form of projection. So we can see that with therapists very often, right? They are solving your problem by solving their own, thinking that your problem is your problem, right? Did you get that? I hope so. You can rewind if you didn't. What is displacement? Remember, ego is the self. So displacement, ego substitute an unacceptable object of negative behavior, emotions onto an acceptable object. Ego substitute an unacceptable object of negative behavior or emotions onto an acceptable object. What's an unacceptable object of my anger? Might be the infant, might be my infant, right? It's not acceptable to shake a baby. Right? So I get angry at the baby because the baby's won't stop crying. What do I do? I might go outside and what? All kinds of things. Displacement can be positive, right? I can go outside and do some heavy yard work if I get angry, right? So that could be positive, right? But when Freud was talking about it, he was talking about kicking the dog. Basically, just the best example is you go and you kick the dog. Instead of displacement, this is called the kicking the dog defense mechanism. That's displacement, right? You get angry at something. Who always gets the brunt of it? The dog, right? Okay. Now in this day and age, you can't say something like that, but you get the concept. It was the thing on the bottom of the totem pole. It's the reason why we've got so many animal rights activists, because what happens at the bottom of the totem pole? You get kicked around. That is displacement. Let's take a look at what we have there in the charts, okay? So there's my example, kick the dog because of a bad day at work. But I've got two studies that are there that kind of give us just a little bit more insight into this concept in a way that makes it a little bit more realistic, all right? So hopefully nobody's kicking a dog, but you get the idea. But here we've got these two studies that hopefully, and you can see they're classic studies, or at least one of them, the 1972 one. By Konechny and Dobb. I think I have that name right. I should. Okay, so we're studying two things. We're studying individuals who are frustrated and how they lash out when they're frustrated. Okay? All right, so we see there that we've got a subject and a target. All right, so the target is the person who's getting the shocks. The subjects are the person who was frustrated or not frustrated. All right, so a person came into a lab and they were frustrated. All right, so that is the experimental group. You are the part of the control group if you were not frustrated. All that means is we were studying one group and we were comparing it to a group that we didn't do anything with. So the group we were studying was the frustrated group, all right? So we frustrated them, we aggravated them, right? We could have aggravated them by making them do a tedious task and then losing all the data and asking them to do it again, all right? So that could be a way that we frustrate them. And we see that we also had so we had targets, and the targets were either a target that was part of the frustration. So it was the person who frustrated me. Was it the frustrator, right? The person who frustrated me. And now I get to give them shocks. I get to give them shocks, or a stranger shocks. Okay? Look at that. If I wasn't frustrated at all, I gave equal shocks to the person who frustrated me and a stranger, right? The frustrator, obviously, and a non-frustrated was just another person, right? So I gave them equal shocks, but significantly less than those people who were frustrated. And here's the thing. I did not have to give the person who frustrated me shocks, and only that person who frustrated me shocks. Who did I want to give shocks to? Anyone. Anyone. I didn't care if it was the person who frustrated me or if it was a stranger. Projection, right? I'm sorry, not projection, displacement. Displacement. I will take it out on a stranger. It doesn't matter to me. Doesn't matter to me, you're a stranger. Doesn't matter to me, you didn't frustrate me. I'll take it out on you. See how that's a real life circumstance for displacement? Displacement of my anger. Let's look closely at the other one there by Bushman and Baumeister. Sorry that's not coming out as clearly as I hope. Here we're looking at the anger that individuals are showing when they're not angered. So that's our control group, right? So just a normal person, everyday person has got some anger, but not, as much as somebody who was frustrated, right? So individuals who are frustrated and then they punched a bag for exercise, or they punched a bag thinking that it was their enemy. All right, so what does all that mean exactly? Well, hold on, I'm trying to grab this over here. Well, in the exercises, they frustrated individuals and then they took their anger score. Let me back up. They frustrated individuals, and then what they did was they allowed them to get their frustration out. Does it help us if we get our frustration out? So you may think about this in terms of I got really mad today at school because somebody was just talking about me and gossiping about me, and I heard what she said, and I was really mad. So what I'm going to go do is I am going to punch a punching bag. I'm going to become physically aggressive on something else. Might be going on the football field. Might be that you just are way more aggressive playing a sport afterwards, right? Or practicing your sport afterwards. But your aggression increases because why? Because you were frustrated at school. So displacement. But does it help? Does it help if I displace my anger and kick the dog? Does it help if I displace my anger and punch a punching bag? What we see here in the second chart there is that individuals were frustrated and sat quietly. They were frustrated and then they got to punch a punching bag, but they said, all right, this is an exercise and we want to see, so they framed it as an exercise. So for the next part of this study, you're going to come in and exercise by punching a punching bag. Look at their anger score there. Look at their anger score for bar number 2. Bar number 3 is you get to punch a punching bag and then picture the person who frustrated you on it. Then afterwards, they got to give shocks to people. And what happened in the shocks? For the person who sat quietly, control group, the person who punched the punching bag for exercise, we're looking at their anger score now, which is all the way to the left. And the person who punched the punching bag thinking of their enemy. What do we see there? We see that the person with the highest anger score was the person who should have gotten it out by punching the punching bag, thinking that it was the enemy. That is the person who should have gotten all their anger out. But they didn't, did they? So that demonstrates more displacement. What did they do? They gave more shocks the next time around to a person. That's what they did. So they had displacement. Even if they had an opportunity to punch it thinking of Steve, they still had displacement and it increased their anger. It didn't decrease their anger. So kicking the dog, does it make you feel better? No, it increases your anger, is what we know. The next defense mechanism is sublimation. Sublimation. And what is sublimation? Sublimation is when you turn a traumatic event into a social benefit. So this is where, as in example number 1, an abused child becomes, for example, a counselor or a therapist, right? For people who have been abused. Example number 2 is sexually repressed thoughts are expressed instead creatively. So if individuals who may have, sex addictions, for example, instead of becoming a sex predator, a sex offender, they turn that into paintings, into sculptures, right? They can do that. So Dr. Kevorkian, for example, instead of literally, it was euthanasia, right? So instead of killing his patients, euthanasia style, he turned it to art and became a pretty great artist. His art was very deep and dark, though. If you look at it, it was very deep and dark. So I might be a dark person, but I can still turn that into something positive, okay? This is Stuart Little from Saturday Night Live, who turns all things into things positive, giving himself some affirming statements. self-affirmation. Self-affirmation. You are good. You do really well. People like me. Those are self-affirmation statements. So sublimation, turning something that was hurtful into something that is a social benefit. And then we've got both repression and suppression. This is when the ego unconsciously keeps unacceptable thoughts in the unconscious. Repression is when you don't want to grow up. So you're keeping adult thoughts out of your conscious awareness. I don't want to grow up. I want to act like a little child. That's repression. It happens a lot of times in older children. When a new sibling comes around, what do? They regress back to an earlier age. That's regression, right? So when the thought of me having to be the grown-up and not being babied anymore, there's a new baby and I can't be babied any longer, I regress back to an age that I can act more like a baby. Okay? But we do it all the time. What's a bachelor party except for a regression in action, right? I'm getting married, have to take responsibility. I regress back to a time when I was free. What is a bachelor party but regression in action? And suppression is keeping those unwanted thoughts out forever, right? So you simply do not remember them. Regression, I avoid them. Suppression, I don't remember them at all. So our examples: having no memory before the age of 7 because of abuse. Or example number 2, you fail to remember the details of an extramarital affair. That can happen too, right? I have suppressed those ideas or those thoughts. Rationalization. What is rationalization? This is when the ego reinterprets unacceptable behavior. So motivations are acceptable. You reinterpret your behavior that people don't like to be acceptable. Your motivations were acceptable. Yes, maybe I do smoke, but it keeps me from eating. That's a rationalization. Unacceptable behaviors are turned into a motivation for something acceptable. I don't eat. Example number 1, student blames teacher for failing the test. Unacceptable behavior, failing a test. The motivation is to blame the teacher because that would be acceptable. Man beats wife because she deserves it, right? So there is unacceptable behavior, but I rationalize why I did it because I've told her time and time again, have that meal on the table when I get home. She deserved it. That's a rationalization. Let's look at the cartoon there because the cartoon is kind of funny. I like it. When someone else orders complicated drink at Starbucks, I can't believe this. Pretentious fake is holding up the line. And so there that guy is ordering, right? Wait, hold on just a minute. I need some macchiato vanilla latte, right? I can't believe this pretentious fake is holding up the line. And then when you order a complicated drink at Starbucks, you what? You are what? You are sophisticated. Oh, see the person behind? He's so sophisticated. A true coffee connoisseur or a true coffee lover, right? When you order a complicated drink, people think of you as being, sophisticated. Deserving of such a fine coffee drink. That's what they think. That's what we think they think when we order something complicated like that. It's a rationalization, right? When somebody else runs the yellow light, they're a careless driver. When we run the yellow light, we didn't have any choice because I would have what? Slammed on my brakes, and then that, which I didn't do, and then that motorcycle driver would have slammed in the back of me. So I ran, but I didn't run it right. I did it, and I slowed down carefully. So what he was paying attention to was his own selfish goals. And now I promise to get to the World Values Survey, the World Values Survey. And what is the World Values Survey? Well, and this is something that you might want to take part in. There's actually a couple surveys, and this one I find to be extremely important and extremely interesting as well. I probably should go there and get some data and do some, writing of some papers. Because there's all kinds of data out there in the World Values Survey, and the data is really interesting. So let's see if I can't get that World Values Survey up there for you, and I'll just show you just a little bit of an example of it. Give me one sec while I add this. And you can see, so here is the main web page here for the World Values Survey. And there are, you can see down there that there is data and documentation there. And in this data and documentation, we can see, although it doesn't let me scroll is the big problem here. So even when I'm interacting, it doesn't let me scroll. Now you can see a little bit of this. I'm so sad that it's not letting me scroll, but if you take a look all the way over there to the right, what you can see is a list of countries. And this is data then from the wave of 2017 to 2022. And what they have is they've got all kinds of findings here and all kind. I don't know if I could get anything up here that's worth you looking at. Oh my gosh. I figured out how to do it. I just didn't know how to do it. It was with 2 fingers. You can see all kinds of information that they are providing here for this World Data Survey. All right, now I know how. There we go. It must actually have to take a minute to adjust. And you see what you can do here then? What you can do here is you can pick the selected countries. So right now it is not letting me move through this, okay? Oh, I was scrolling and that was like something that was amazing for me, and now it won't let me scroll again. Oh, why won't you let me scroll? But you can see here, all right, so I'm going to pick China. So I just picked China, and then I'm going to go to the survey questions. And then you can see here, I can look at a survey question. So let's say I wanted to look at issues on how China feels about issues on gender, let's say. Here you can see, all right, so there is a questionnaire from China on gender equality regarding the job. Let's take a look at it. So we see here, is it going to let me scroll? No, it's not. It's not going to let me scroll here. But we can see here about should there be gender equality? I can't see what the question says is what's unfortunate. So let me just, I am going to take a minute. And this is worth playing around with. There's just no other way to work this except for playing around with it right in front of you. There's just isn't another way to do this. But I'm going to go ahead and do it. And see if I can't read. We're doing an online analysis, so I just want to read right here what it says. I'm picking it right now. So China, I picked China. And then the survey question had to do with gender. Okay, so what you can't see is I guess nothing. They really don't have anything. So it just says what Weltzel equality 1, gender equality. Usually they have a question. What kind of question is that? There is no question. It's so interesting here too, because what you can do is you can I see it? Let's look at the maps there. No, I can't see anything there. Yeah, I don't really know what the question is there. It really just does seem kind of silly. Is there gender equality in the job market? That's what it is. Is there gender equality in the job market? And what do people believe? So there's their opinion in the World Values Survey. It's low to high, where people think that it's not very high, it's not very low. Whether or not in China they think there's gender equality in politics. The next one on gender would be gender equality in education. They believe that's very high in China, gender equality in education. So see, you get to answer these different kinds of questions, and you get whether or not these are valued by the general population. Let's see here. What else do we want to know about China? About equality in China. How about... Oh, look. Oh, Here we go. Now I am able to run through these questions. Look at that. Important child qualities like obedience. How important is obedience to people in China? If I click on that, I can see it's important. Childhood obedience is important. 5.7%, not mentioned as important in 93% of individuals who took that. Okay, where's the back button is the thing I don't see. Oh, there we go. Let's compare that to, can I see another city? No, I can't. It's not letting me scroll here. Are your neighbors heavy drinkers? It's mentioned 83% of the time as being important in China. All right, so do you get the idea about this and how incredible this is? So, this is a website where you can put a question in about all kinds of values and compare that to other people across the world about what they said. Now, I'm sorry that I couldn't show it to you a little bit better, but you can see there that there are maps that demonstrate who has more or less, depending on the countries that you pick, on all kinds of values. They have values about, you can get an idea of the number of children that people are having in different countries. You can get the idea about what they think about gun control in that country, about whether or not they have faith in politics, about whether or not they think that people should own land. All kinds of value questions have been added to this World Value Survey, and they keep adding more and more questions to the survey, and more countries they're getting. Initially, when they first started this in 2004, I believe it was. No, it was before that. We could probably see here when we had the earliest data. Oh, there we go. Select the wave. 1981. That's when they started. This was 1981. And they had 80 some countries involved in it. And now, I don't remember how many, but I'm sure they tell us that in the introduction, how many countries are involved in this. So a boatload of information on values, and you get an idea about whether or not these values are ingrained in our DNA, because they would be important to everybody across the planet. What is important? What are the values that are important to everybody across the planet? So those are some interesting questions I think that we should look at. This is Dr. Annette Feravich, and I am here in the Critical Thinking Classroom. We got through with a lot today. I'm really happy. I will be back here in about an hour, and we'll be back here with our spiritual classroom, then our philosophical classroom, and then the reading room. Thanks for joining me. I'm the teacher, and we are here in the classroom, the Critical Thinking